Most people believe their financial problems exist because they lack willpower. They think if they could just be more disciplined, more focused, more consistent, everything would fall into place. But what if willpower isn't the solution? What if willpower is the problem? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Willpower is a limited, fragile resource, and building your financial life on something fragile is a design flaw. Every day, your willpower is being drained by work decisions, by social interactions, by stress, by notifications, by emotional regulation, by simply existing in a modern world. By the time you're asked to make a smart money decision, your mental energy is already depleted. And yet, that's exactly when most financial systems demand perfection. At the checkout counter, late at night, after a long day, when emotions are high and patience is low. This isn't a personal failure. It's a structural mismatch, you being asked to rely on your weakest tool at the hardest moment. Now here's where it gets more interesting. People who appear financially disciplined aren't using more willpower than you. They're using less. They've designed their lives so that fewer decisions require discipline at all. They don't resist temptation. They reduce exposure. They don't fight impulses. They pre-commit away from them. They don't trust their future self. They design around their future self's weaknesses. This is the part nobody tells you. Willpower feels virtuous, but systems create results, and the brain prefers results. Now let's talk about why willpower fails so reliably. Willpower relies on constant decision-making. Should I spend this? Should I save more? Should I invest now? Should I wait? Each decision adds cognitive load, and cognitive load creates fatigue. Fatigue creates shortcuts. Shortcuts create regret. This cycle repeats over and over until people reach a conclusion that feels logical, but is completely wrong. I'm just bad with money. No, you're just human. Now let's talk about emotional timing. Willpower is weakest during emotional spikes, stress, excitement, fear, boredom, comparison, and money decisions are almost always emotional. Retail therapy, impulse upgrades, panic selling, oversaving from fear, overspending from optimism. Willpower doesn't neutralize emotion. It collapses under it. Systems don't. Systems operate regardless of how you feel. They don't care if you're tired. They don't care if you're anxious. They don't care if you're celebrating. They execute. Now, here's a critical shift. Most people try to increase willpower. The smarter move is to reduce friction, reduce decisions, reduce exposure, reduce temptation, reduce timing conflicts. Every reduction increases success. Think of it this way. If you had to manually approve every breath, you wouldn't survive a day. Your body automates survival. We should do the same with money. Now let's talk about identity damage. When willpower fails, and it always does eventually, people internalize the failure. They feel weak, undisciplined, inconsistent. This creates shame. Shame leads to avoidance. Avoidance leads to worse outcomes. This is why people stop checking accounts, stop opening bills, stop tracking spending. It's not laziness, it's emotional self-protection. Systems break this cycle. Because systems don't fail loudly, they quietly adjust. Now let's talk about where willpower actually belongs. Willpower is valuable, but not for daily execution. It's valuable for design, for setup, for boundaries, for decisions made once, not repeatedly. Use willpower to build systems, not to operate them. That's the leverage point. Now let's talk about real-world examples. People who automatically increase savings when income rises don't feel disciplined. They barely notice. People who invest automatically don't agonize over timing. They don't debate. They don't panic. People who separate spending accounts don't fight temptation. They don't see it. This isn't discipline. This is design. Now let's talk about why this feels uncomfortable. Because it removes ego. You don't get credit for resisting. You don't feel heroic. You don't feel strong. The progress is quiet, and that bothers people. But quiet progress compounds faster. Now let's talk about freedom. Ironically, systems create more freedom than willpower ever could. When decisions are automated, mental space opens. When mental space opens, creativity increases. When creativity increases, income opportunities expand. This is how financial systems indirectly increase earning power, not by motivation, by mental bandwidth. Now here's the final reframe. If your financial plan requires you to be perfect forever, it's not a plan, it's a fantasy. A good financial system assumes you'll get tired, you'll get emotional, you'll get distracted, you'll have bad months, and it still works anyway. That's the goal, not control, resilience. Because resilience compounds even when motivation disappears. So if willpower hasn't worked for you, that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you were trying to win a long-term game with a short-term tool. Design beats discipline every time. And here's the part most people miss. Willpower doesn't just fail randomly. It fails predictably. It fails at the exact moment the stakes feel highest. When you're stressed about money, your brain shifts into protection mode. It becomes obsessed with avoiding pain, not building progress. In that state, willpower isn't a strength. It's a liability, because the brain starts prioritizing emotional relief over long-term outcomes. That's why people overspend after a bad day. That's why people abandon plans during uncertainty. That's why people undo months of progress during moments of fear or excitement, not because they forgot the plan, but because their emotional brain temporarily took control. This is where most financial advice becomes dangerous. It assumes a calm, rational version of you is always in charge. That version barely exists. Most of your life is lived by a tired, distracted, emotionally loaded version of you. And any financial system that doesn't account for that version is doomed. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable: the myth of strong people. We admire people who seem disciplined, who never miss a workout, who never overspend, who always stay on track. But what we're actually seeing is selection bias. We're seeing people whose environments support their behavior, not people fighting constant internal battles. Put the most disciplined person in a chaotic environment long enough and they'll crack. Put an average person in a well-designed environment and they'll outperform expectations. This isn't motivational, it's mechanical. Now let's zoom out. Every behavior is shaped by three forces: cue, response, reward. Willpower tries to override this loop. Systems reshape it. That's the difference. When money is one tap away, spending becomes automatic. When savings are invisible, restraint becomes effortless. When investments happen before you see the money, progress becomes boringly consistent. Notice something important. None of this requires motivation. That's the point. Motivation fluctuates. Emotion fluctuates. Energy fluctuates. Systems don't. Now here's where people resist. They say, but I want to feel in control. What they really mean is, I want to feel powerful. Willpower feeds that feeling. Systems don't. Systems feel passive, unsexy, anti-dramatic. But drama is expensive. Calm is profitable. Now let's talk about the hidden cost of constant self-control. Every time you resist an impulse, you pay a psychological tax. That tax shows up as irritability, decision fatigue, mental exhaustion, burnout. Eventually, the brain seeks compensation. And compensation usually comes in the form of indulgence. This is why cheat days exist. This is why binge spending follows extreme frugality. This is why rigid budgets collapse. The brain keeps score. Systems avoid this entirely. They don't require resistance. They require acceptance. Acceptance of who you actually are, not who you wish you were on your best day. Now, let's talk about why this feels threatening. Because letting go of willpower feels like giving up responsibility. But responsibility doesn't mean control. It means design. It means anticipating failure and building around it. Pilots don't rely on reflexes. Surgeons don't rely on memory. Engineers don't rely on hope. They rely on hope. They rely on systems. Because the cost of failure is too high, your financial future deserves the same respect. Now let's address a deeper layer. Willpower failure doesn't just hurt finances. It damages identity. Each failure chips away at self-trust, and when self-trust erodes, people stop believing change is possible. They stop trying. They settle. They rationalize stagnation. Systems rebuild self-trust quietly, not through grand wins, but through small, repeated proof. Money saved without effort, bills paid without stress, progress happening without obsession. This is how confidence actually forms, not from force, from evidence. Now let's talk about boredom. Boredom is a feature, not a bug. Wealth grows in boring environments. Excitement is expensive. Predictability is profitable. Most people confuse stimulation with progress, but stimulation burns energy. Progress conserves it. Systems create boredom, and boredom creates space. Space to think. Space to live. Space to live. This is why wealthy people often seem emotionally neutral about money. They're not detached. They're insulated. Now here's the final uncomfortable truth. If your financial life requires constant effort, you've already lost, because life will always demand effort elsewhere. Family, health, career, unexpected events. Money has to be the quiet part, the background process, the autopilot, the thing that works even when you're not thinking about it. That's real security, not control, not discipline, not hustle. Reliability. So stop asking, how do I become more disciplined? Start asking, how do I make this automatic? That single shift changes everything, because when willpower is removed from the equation, progress stops being fragile. And fragile progress never survives long term. In the next video, I'll show you how one invisible default decision silently controls more of your financial life than income, intelligence, or effort ever will. Once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. And, more importantly, you'll know exactly how to change it.